Hello and welcome to another episode of Everyday Edwards. We just want to start by saying thank you to everybody who has watched, who has
given us feedback.
We've had
awesome feedback.
Really good ideas, really good names of videos, and even more suggestions for what to name the podcast or the vlog.
And you guys are really creative.
Really
creative.
And the fact that you care enough to tell us, we really do.
We really appreciate it.
So the other thing that we want to do is maybe apologize for last week. Because at the end of the video,
Sam would like to really apologize.
I would like to apologize.
Jamie had nothing to do with it.
I may have put an April Fool's joke at the end of the video and forgot to put April Fool's afterwards. And apparently that's an important part of the equation. You're supposed to say April Fool's, and I didn't. And so we got a lot of phone calls. We won't say exactly what the thing was, but we got some phone calls, some text messages. Our family got some phone calls and text messages. So yes, that was not the best move on my part, so I apologize. Lesson learned. Lesson for you guys, April 1st, you need to be aware of these things.
No, that's not a lesson to you guys because people don't know what date it is.
Yeah, that's on me, so I apologize. So we've also got a lot of requests to see the babies, to see Caleb and Ellie. So what I did today was I recorded some clips of just our day. It was just me with the babies today. Jamie was at work. So this is kind of what it looks like on a Saturday morning, an average Saturday morning with Caleb and Ellie. So here's a little clip to see what that looks like. Welcome to Saturday morning in the Edwards house. Jamie is at work. So I get to cook for the kids, and I think I actually did a pretty good job. I mean, look at this. We've got your spinach, we've got eggs, we got everything but the bagel topping on it. Ellie, you're hungry, aren't you? All right. So last week's episode, we called it Never Settle. And it was kind of the story of how we first met, how we started in our relationship, even before the relationship. And we talked about the importance of not settling for the person that you're gonna spend the rest of your life with, not settling for relationships, even with friendships, whatever it might be. Like, it's important to make sure that we are valuing the relationships that need to be valued and to not find ourselves stuck in relationships that we shouldn't be in.
Or becoming complacent in relationships that we're in.
Yes.
It's easier said than done, but it's too important.
It really is. Yeah. And so in doing that, I kind of started thinking about maybe it's so important not to settle, but when you're in a relationship that's important, especially we believe that when you're in a marriage, like that's the point where the never settling part is kind of, you're past that point and now it's time to fight. Fight for the relationship, not just fight in the relationship, but yes, fight for the relationship. And that's really important.
That's right.
But actually part of fighting for the relationship can involve, we won't say fights, but arguments.
Disagreements.
Yeah. And arguments can be they can be a very valuable part of your relationship. Having disagreements depending on
the way you handle them.
Exactly, depending on your mindset in the arguments. Am I fighting or am I arguing just so I can be right?
Right.
Or are we having this conversation because we want to see a change? We want to make the adjustment that we need to.
We want to make each other and our relationship better.
And the priority.
Yeah,
so I think that anybody in a relationship can really relate to that. But it's not just romantic relationships.
No, any relationship.
Friendships, family relationships. But for us, and this is always notable, and if you know us, maybe you've heard this story, but our first quote-unquote argument took place over what else would it take place over but food.
For Sam.
For me. We had just got married. We had moved into our apartment. And Jamie had made me a delicious dish that I know was delicious and I'm sure was amazing in every way. But I made the mistake
But it resulted in a very big argument.
Yes, I made the mistake of noticing that there was no protein in the meal. No chicken, no steak, no fish.
No meat.
No meat. And for me, a meal always has to have meat in it.
Guy.
I'm a carnivore, or maybe technically an omnivore.
But it had a lot of dairy in it, and I feel like that...
No.
Yes.
So listen,
I feel like
out of this argument came a very important realization. And from that point forward, I've always had meat in my dishes. So I guess that wasn't the point of the argument that I was supposed to be taking out of it. Okay, so probably the point is that in arguments that we're going to have is to make sure that we're not just looking at our own perspective, that we're not just being defensive, that we're looking at the other person. Because if I would have stopped and thought about how much time you put in preparing that meal, I would have never said something like that. And sometimes we just need to be willing to keep our mouths shut. Like, that's just good practical advice sometimes.
Being sensitive.
Yeah, look at the other person. And that's something I had to learn, obviously. And that's sometimes something you overlook. Like, you live a whole life before you get married. You live a whole life before
Especially you lived alone for a few years. You were a bachelor.
Are you calling me old? Yes, like you do. Like, I lived on my own and I had different habits, and I'm sure that I always had meat in my own food because I was cooking it. It was probably terrible.
Yeah, like Sam's tuna fish.
All right, so I think
macaroni and cheese, mayonnaise.
Yeah. I may have. I think I mentioned that in a clip that I was thinking about showing. Maybe it will, but I had this dish that I thought was amazing. It was.
And just up until honestly last month, Sam thought it was the most amazing creation.
I made something that was total bachelor. It was pasta and tuna fish and hard-boiled eggs and mayonnaise and anything else that I could find to throw in it. And I would eat it hot, and I thought it was so good. And so I made it semi-recently, thinking, oh, this is going to be so good. It was so bad.
So bad.
I got so spoiled.
But at least it had your protein in it.
It did have my protein, but I was so spoiled. I'm so spoiled now having your delicious cooking. And we're going to do some cooking together on the vlog, I'm sure. But yes, my meal was terrible. Anyway. Looking at the other person's point of view is so important. Being willing to see their side of it. Being willing to be intentional in even when you're having an argument.
So important.
Looking at how you communicate, how you because if you have an argument over and over again, which tends to happen, right? You have the same argument multiple times. It's usually because you're not addressing the things you need to be addressing. You're not looking at, why do we keep coming to this place over and over again? What am I doing over and over again? We keep thinking it's the other person. A lot of times it's us. And I can't think of a specific example, but I think that we have this conversation semi-often. We talk about this all the time, yet still.
Why are we arguing?
Why are we still having this again? Yes. And that brings up a good point. I was listening to a podcast the other day by Kris Vallotton. He's in Bethel Church out of California. And he was talking about how oftentimes in relationships, you get into fights and you bring up things from the past. But what he was saying was when you truly forgive the other person, you no longer have the ability to bring up that stuff from the past because it's dead, it's gone. So it doesn't mean that it gives the other person, it doesn't give me the opportunity to keep doing the same things over and over again. But once I've been forgiven for that, that doesn't come into the equation anymore.
Right.
That's done. And so bringing up stuff from the past is really a bad thing to do. It's not productive. If you're looking to be intentional in your relationship, even in your arguments, it's not a productive thing to do.
And I think that goes to show that it really does take two, you know?
Yeah.
There's two parts to play in it.
That's the crazy part. That's the crazy part about a relationship. I stop and think sometimes she's a totally different person. Like, we think a lot alike now. We do a lot of things. It's crazy how sometimes we have the same thoughts. Like, you say something, I was just about to say that, but you're still a completely, I mean, is this the most obvious statement in the world?
It is, but I think we overlook it a lot of times.
Yeah. But we can be selfish.
We have selfish tendencies, and I think it's important, especially in important relationships such as marriage, you have to think about what the other person is feeling, or how the other person may be feeling. And I know that's easier said than done. You know, when you're in an argument, you're not like, well, let me really think about how
maybe we should
right now.
Record one of our future arguments, and that way we can show everybody how perfect we are. But no, that's important too. And you're talking about two different lives coming together, two different backgrounds, two different family lives, where some people argue one way, other people argue some like passive aggressively, some people yell and scream. You have to learn how you communicate. And communication always is what everyone talks about in marriage, and it's so important, but it doesn't just happen. It's something that has to be intentionally looked at. Yeah.
You know that you keep running into the same problems. Address them. Yeah. You know.
Yeah, I totally
learn
agree.
each other.
Yeah.
You know, you learn how each other handles them.
You also learn the buttons, though, like which buttons you can press when you're in an argument and the emotions are rising high.
All too easy to do.
Or the same thing though is to be able to avoid those things.
Yeah.
And to speak, you know, to talk differently, to be able to communicate differently in those moments, and not just to do it out of emotions, but to be willing to always be looking for the best outcome. And it's so important in every relationship, but relationships really are such an important part of life, and that's what I'm learning a lot, is that we're not meant to do this life alone. We're not meant to figure all these things out on our own. And relationships that God puts in our lives, especially when we're talking about a spouse, but also friends, you know, family members, whatever it is, we need to make sure that we're working on these relationships always and identifying how important they are, because they really are foundational. They're people that we can turn to in difficult times. They're people that can help us. They're people that can help us see our blind spots, like places in our life where we just were missing it. Like, you see things in my life, I'm sure. I don't know if we talked about this already, but just things that you see in me that I wouldn't even see in myself, because
and vice versa.
Yeah, and it really is so important and so valuable to be able to have those relationships.
These relationships are they're too important not to fight for.
Yeah. So that is the moral of this. Like, don't settle for relationships that you're not supposed to be in, but once you're in the relationships that matter,
fight for them.
Fight for it.
And fight to make them better.
Yeah.
You know?
Be intentional in them.
Be intentional. To always want to improve. And to have the best relationship that you can.
Yeah. We want to make sure, especially when we're being examples for our kids, we want to make sure that they see a healthy example of what it is to not agree on something, and to be able to still work through it, to still love each other, and to walk away from it better than when we walked into it. So I think that's, you know, hopefully that's something that spoke to you this week. Just want to encourage you once again to comment below, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell notification, any of those things, share it. That would be awesome. I know a couple people mentioned that they didn't know how to comment when it's on like a smartphone, on an iPhone or whatever it might be. And if you're watching on an iPhone or a smartphone, you have to scroll all the way to the bottom past all of the, you know, suggested videos, and you can comment below. But we'd love to see your comments. And thank you so much for taking the time to watch, guys, because that really means a ton to us. So thank you.
Next week.
Have a great week. I don't want to wake up the house. Sorry. That's too loud. What's that mean? You trying to say up, please? All right, you can get up, but first I'm gonna give you one more bite, and then there's a big bite. You got it? You got it? Open. All right. Okay. Way too much spinach. All right. Hey, Caleb. Listen. This is the secret to breakfast success on a Saturday morning. Would you like some blueberries? Would you like some blueberries? Blueberries, okay. All right. Here's some good antioxidants for you, bud. Ooh, so exciting. Look at this. It's the full Edwards family. Caleb. Hey, you. Say hello to everybody. Hey, bud. Caleb. Caleb. Say hi. Say cheese. Say I was running around Around and
That's the most disgusting thing ever.
So this is a little story about what happens when you need to take insulin and you take too much. When you take too much, your blood sugar drops, and it drops quickly, and then you start to sweat. So it's not just sweating, you feel a little bit out of body. So you have to get some sugar back in you, and there are probably healthier ways to do this. However, I opted for the ice cream, cookies, banana, almond butter, AKA eat everything that you possibly can approach to this, so that way you feel better quickly and you get to eat good food at the same time. Caleb has been helping me though. Stop eating your thing. I don't understand why you're doing that. So anyway, so what happens on Saturdays when you take too much insulin. But you get ice cream out of it. And this is actually pretty good. I haven't had strawberry ice cream in a while, but I'm trying all the flavors at once. So that's all.